Let's discuss several ways to maintain your garden and keep it healthy. When you start a garden, you might think you need to get rid of insects and weeds in order to protect your plants. But the biointensive method recommends that we think of insects and weeds as a contributing part of a diverse ecosystem. Certain plants, like parsley and celery, can be a natural magnet for insects, which, as John tells Tim, is a good thing.
So John, there's so many insects here. What are they doing?
To have a really healthy garden, you need to have some harmful insects because the beneficial insects need a food source. This way we're preserving the whole cycle, and it's really wonderful. But these insects also are helping pollinate. Now, these are self-pollinating. If the insects weren't here, the parsley seed would happen anyway, and the celery seed would happen anyway. But it's going to happen a little bit better because these insects are going to scatter the pollen that's necessary.
Even just a few parsley and celery plants together will attract beneficial insects that will help the entire garden.
And most excitingly, once all this pollination and insect life and insect control has happened, you get to eat the celery seed and the parsley seed.
All right.
And save a little for planting next year's garden.
Fantastic.
Weeds can also be beneficial. Here, Margot is weeding a bed of sorghum that was planted about a month ago.
So now that these plants are growing up a little more, they're going to start to fill out here pretty fast, and they're going to be taking care of covering the soil. You can see the weeds do a wonderful job of keeping the soil covered and helping to retain the moisture. But at this point, I want to get them out of here so that the sorghum can take over. And I don't want these weeds to go to seed and introduce more weed seed into my bed. That has happened a little bit in the past, and we're trying to get on top of it. So I want to make sure that I don't have weed seed and give the sorghum plenty of space to grow, and also allow the sorghum to take advantage of the nutrients that are in the soil.
As Margot explains to Lisa, these weeds are good to eat.
This happens to be a lot of a weed called purslane, which is wonderful and edible. Feel free to give it a little try if you want.
I love purslane.
I know. We created a purslane cake recipe from it, which was really fun.
Once your plants have matured, they often hide weeds in the bed, making the weeding more challenging.
Well, you can see that this type of weeding is a little different than when you have young plants and you're sort of clearing the bed around to give them space, because these leeks are fairly large at this point, and they do a good job of keeping the soil shaded on their own. So what I'm doing at this point is getting the weeds out from inside there so that the leeks can fill the area and grow a little bit bigger. And I don't want these weeds to go to seed, so again, I'm trying to get them out before they're so mature that they're going to seed.
The biointensive method can actually make weeding easier.
You know, one of the things I love about biointensive and weeding is that everything goes on the hexagonal spacing pattern. So when I'm weeding and I have something bulky like leeks, I know where all my plants are, and I can just fish my hand in there down the center between the little rows here of plants, and I know that any plant I come to that's out of the pattern is a weed. So that allows me to just stick my hands in there and go for it without having to focus so clearly with my eyes. I really enjoy that. And it's important with weeds, if you can, to try and get the root.
Close spacing helps create and preserve a microenvironment within each bed.
These are our parsnips here right next to the leeks that we just weeded. And you can see with this how well they're covering the soil. This is the idea that we're going for when we want to plant things with the close spacing, so that when they're mature, the leaf edges are just barely touching, and they're providing a good shadow or good cover for the soil. So underneath that, we're creating the little mini ecosystem of humidity and carbon dioxide and a nice little microclimate there. We're not going to need to water nearly as much because it's doing a wonderful job protecting that soil moisture level for us.
It's important to remember to observe your garden carefully in order to understand what it needs. This is especially true when it comes to watering.
One way or the other about how the weather that day or that week has affected where the water is in the beds. We find in this climate that because of the wind, because of the intensity of the sun, and because we don't get any rain in the summer, we have to keep watering our beds about twice a day, applying enough to make each bed moist to its needs. It's another reason why we don't use overhead water, we don't use the oscillating sprinklers, and we don't use drip, because those give you a chance to ignore your beds as opposed to pay attention to them. If you can set a timer and then leave your beds to go, then you're not paying as close attention as you would if you were walking through every day, maybe twice a day, and feeling. You'll find you learn a lot about your garden just that way.
When you water, you're not just watering the plants, but the entire bed.
Just as we focus on growing soil instead of plants specifically, we work on watering the soil instead of focusing on watering the plants, because there's a whole lot of life under the soil that is there to in effect make our plants stronger. All the microbial life, fungi, that do not function without moisture. So if you water your plants to the exclusion of your soil, with a drip system for instance, you're not seeing to your soil's life as well.
If you live in a hot, dry climate, a protective covering over your bed will also help to retain moisture. Dan shows Lisa a simple method to determine if you've watered enough.
So just watered this bean bed, and we're going to see what we find just by sticking my finger in here and making a hole. It feels like to a finger's depth, it's a good moisture level. You see from what I dig up there that it's holding together pretty well. It's not crumbling apart. It's also not soggy. So this is something that you simply learn by lots of experience. And this bed looks like it's watered just fine.
Compost in the soil acts as a sponge to retain moisture.
And what role does compost play in the moisture content of the beds?
Compost is the most important thing we can do to keep our soil healthy. It replenishes the organic matter that gets lost in the course of cultivation. And organic matter, of the many roles that it fills, it helps to keep water. It helps to trap water like a sponge in your bed. Hold on to it rather than letting your soil erode. And that's saving two things. It's saving your soil from leaving, and it's also holding the moisture, which is, as we're coming to understand, in this world more and more of a precious and finite resource.
A positive attitude towards insects, weeds, and watering will help you achieve large yields and healthy plants. The biointensive method promotes thriving microecosystems in each of our beds. And as Dan likes to remind us, the best way to keep your garden healthy is for you to spend lots of time observing and learning about its needs.
We look at every bed, each plant, twice a day, and that allows you to see if some plants are suffering, some plants are stronger than others. It allows you to address those needs as you go along.